immigrant citizens, immigrant voters, foreign-born voters have gone tremendously to the right on this issue in 2024 and 2025 versus where they were in 2020. Closest to or trust more in immigration. You go back to 2020. Democrats, get this, held a 32-point lead on this issue. Immigrant voters were in the Democratic camp. Jump forward to 2024, 2025. Look at that shift, a 40-point shift to the right among immigrant voters. Republicans now lead on this issue by 8 points over Democrats, more so than any other group that I could find. The group of voters who became more hawkish on immigration were, in fact, immigrants themselves, immigrants who are registered to vote in this country.
So that's on that issue. How about how they feel about kind of traditionally, historically, about Donald Trump?
Yeah. So, you see this shift and you go, what is going on underneath the hood? Well, take a look, Donald Trump. You remember when he first ran back in 2016, immigrant voters were one of his weakest spots. But look at this. Trump's vote share in presidential election among, again, immigrant citizens, those who are registered to vote. Look at this. In 2016, he got 36% of the vote. You go to 2020, 39% of the vote. Look at this. In 2024, all the way up to 47% of the vote. Some polls I looked at had him barely losing that vote. Some polls I looked at had him barely winning that vote. Again, there is no block of voters that shifted more to the right from 2020 to 2024 than immigrant voters. And Donald Trump, at least in some surveys, actually won that vote. On average, it's about equal. So there may be all this stuff, right, about undocumented immigrants and Trump being harsh on them, but immigrant voters themselves have increasingly liked Donald Trump and have increasingly moved to the right on immigration and into the Republican camp.
A 40-point swing. A 40-point swing to the right. Gang, if you've been with this channel for some time now, I'm sorry. I don't mean to flex here, but this is just frankly old news. Come on in, gang. Great to see you all here. I mean, we've been reporting on this mass defection over a year and a half now among immigrant voters. I mean, it's so fascinating to watch the legacy media finally catch up to us here. We have long reported, along with others, as a matter of fact, I've been very much dependent on their analysis. Rich Barris, the People's pundit, Robert Barnes, Larry Schweikert, number of others, Mark Mitchell of Rasmussen. They have been noting that the very constituency that came out overwhelmingly for Obama in 2008 has shifted. They've been talking about this now for a year and a half. It has shifted dramatically to the right, to the populist right, and to the Democrats' nightmare. The Obama coalition has transformed into the Trump coalition. And that transformation could signal Republican political dominance for the next generation easily. And by the way, it's not just CNN recognizing this. Look at this from the latest from Morning Consult. Now, if you don't know, Morning Consult, I mean, if you've been with this channel, you'll know this, but they are actually probably the worst polling outlet out there. I mean, some of our good polling friends, the most accurate ones of 2024, they call them the Morning Compost. They're so bad. They're worse in terms of their consistent left-wing bias. They're always oversampling Democrats. And if we listen to the likes of Morning Consult, we would have thought that Kamala Harris was going to win in a landslide. Nevertheless, I mean, seriously, look at these numbers. Trump is polling at his highest net approval rating since his inauguration in late January. So just like we saw from Rasmussen, just like we saw from Rich Barris and Big Data polling over the weekend, two of the most accurate pollsters of 2024, they both have Trump as of this weekend in the mid-50s. He's polling around as high as he was polling back in late January. Well, lo and behold, even Morning Consult, I almost said Morning Compost, even Morning Consult has him up that high. So we're seeing corroboration after corroboration that President Trump has hit a political polling sweet spot with this issue of immigration. And Trump knows it. You could see it. You could see it in the glow of his face. He knows that he is on the right side of the 80-20 issue, and he is doubling down on mass deportations, even more so than the Democrats are doubling down on their stupidity, their woke stupidities. Check this out.
These protests obviously started in reaction to these large-scale ICE operations in Los Angeles. Should people expect to see similar operations in the rest of the country?
Yeah.
And will similar protests see similar response?
As you know, we're moving murderers out of our country that were put here by Biden or the auto pen. The auto pen really did. I mean, the people, whether it's Lisa Monaco or whoever operated the auto pen, these are criminals. The people are criminals that allowed these criminals into our country. And I don't think that Biden knew what the hell he was doing. I don't think he even knew about it. But when they opened up our borders for the whole world to come in, yeah, we're going to get them out. We're getting them out. We're starting to get acknowledgement from the courts that, you know, there's a system. They come in without courts and they go out, they want trials and everything else. I think that's starting to work out now. Judges are starting to see what a terrible situation it is. Many of those people that you saw on television last night are criminals that were allowed into our country by Biden, and they want to stay, and we don't want them. And they come from jails, and they come from mental institutions, and they come from all over the world, not just South America. And we're not going to let them stay. And this is the first, perhaps, of many, or perhaps, you know, if we didn't attack this one very strongly, you'd have them all over the country. But I can inform the rest of the country that when they do it, if they do it, they're going to be met with equal or greater force than we met right here. We did a great job. The people, you, Christy, and Tom Holman, and all of the people, Pete Hegseth, all of the people involved did an amazing job. We stopped a disaster. And it looks like a planned disaster, not just, this didn't just happen. They had weapons, they had tools, they had everything you needed.
Now, what he's talking about there is what we reported on yesterday, right? The New York Post has identified two organizations behind these riots. First, you have the group called the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. It purports itself to be a prominent Los Angeles-based immigrant advocacy organization. They raked in $34 million in government grants back in 2023, mostly from California in the fiscal year ending June 2023. They staged a protest of ICE's arrest of illegal migrants, including those with serious criminal convictions, just literally hours before all the unrest broke out. So many are pointing the fingers at this coalition as one of the major funders and instigators of this riot. And the second organization is the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the PSL. And they're described as a Marxist group with a history of organizing aggressive protests, including anti-Israel demonstrations at Columbia University. And this is the group that's linked to the CCP through funding from socialist billionaire Neville Singham and his wife, Jody Evans. She's the founder of the radical far-left protest movement, Code Pink. So Trump is alluding to at least these two organizations. Also, we now know that the Walmart heiress, Christy Walton, is funding full-page color ads in the New York Times for No King's Day, a nationwide counter-protest scheduled for Trump's birthday on June 14th, organized by far-left group Indivisible. And thus far, the word is that the CEO of Walmart has yet to denounce these ads and this call for nationwide protests by the Walmart heiress. But circling back now to the Obama coalition transforming into the Trump coalition, we have to appreciate just how devastating this is for the Democrats, because if you think it through, blacks were not the heart of the Obama coalition. They certainly represented the highest level of support among any group in terms of the percentage of their support as a cohort. But as a voting demographic, blacks are actually rather stagnant as an overall percentage of the population. It's Latinos that are growing. Latinos are fast becoming upwards of 20% of the voting population. And Latinos voted for Obama in 2008 by a margin of more than 2-1, basically 70% to McCain and Romney's 30%. So this was the key to winning presidential elections in perpetuity as far as the Democrats were concerned. The Obama coalition centered on the Latino vote. And that was going to keep Democrats in power in perpetuity because they saw that vote continuing to grow as a percentage of the overall voting demographic. However, something started to happen in 2012 that apparently Democrats did not foresee. Obama started to lose that dominance, especially among Latino men. So in 2012, Obama won 60% of Latino men. Very, very good, but a bit smaller than what he got in 2008. In 2016, that number dropped slightly for Clinton to about 58%. Then in 2020, the number dropped again to about 57% for Biden. And then suddenly, the dam broke. This is what happened in November of 2024. Do you have the video there?
Won among Latino men by 10 points. I was on my computer while you were talking with our dear friend Philip over there, and I looked back at every exit poll that I could find since 1972. I believe that this is the first time ever that a Republican candidate for president won among Latino men, and that supercharged Donald Trump among Latinos overall, and it's why he put forward the best performance among Latino voters since the advent of exit polls in the early 1970s.
So Trump won Latino men by 10 points. I mean, it was an absolutely astonishing development. Now, what we have to appreciate here, in terms of what we're seeing in Los Angeles in these demonstrations that appear to be popping up in cities across the country, are optics that are absolutely revolting to Latinos, particularly Latino men. Remember, we talked about this earlier, but no demographic in the country is more opposed to illegal migration than Latinos, precisely because they're the ones most affected by it. That's why places like Starr County, Texas, a border county, 98% Hispanic. It voted Democrat in every single presidential election for 100 years. But in 2024, they did the unthinkable. They voted Trump. This was the first time in a century Starr County, again, 98% Latino, shifted from blue to red. Again, we predicted this. We saw this. A number of analysts did. We weren't alone. Number of analysts saw that the Obama coalition was becoming the Trump coalition, and Latinos, particularly Latino men, were leading that transition. This is the pattern that we're seeing all across the country. In doubling down on defending illegal migrants, the Democrats are inadvertently destroying any remaining chance they have at winning back the Latino vote for at least the next generation. They erroneously think that doubling down on defending illegals is the key to winning back the Latino vote, but it's the exact opposite. All the objective metrics show it, and even CNN is admitting it. Remember, border security is the number one political issue driving voters today, not just here in the United States. It actually, long before you're in the United States, border security and national and civilizational sovereignty started popping up as a major political issue all across the pond. In the West, it's why Reform UK is now 10 points ahead of Labour and why the Tories look like they're about to go extinct. Deservedly so, by the way, given how they betrayed their voters. It's the number one issue in France with the rise of National Rally. It's the number one issue in Italy with the rise of Giorgia Meloni. It was huge in the recent Poland election with the nationalist populist Nawrocki winning. Chega in Portugal is now officially the number 2 party. It's a brand new party. It's number 2 in popularity for basically hammering on this issue of border security and national sovereignty. And of course, the AfD now, the number 1 most popular party in all of Germany for this very reason. It's called post-security politics, border security, economic security, cultural security. Those are the 3 major political issues for the foreseeable future. And the Democrats have planted every single one of their flags on the wrong side of history. As globalism wanes, history is moving overwhelmingly towards the populists. And nothing proves that more than the Democrats' worst nightmare come true the Obama coalition has officially gone MAGA. But first, while the corrupt federal elites have been quietly building wealth through cryptocurrency, hardworking American patriots have been left behind. But there's an amazing solution. I want to tell you about BlockTrustIRA. They're bringing access to cryptocurrency wealth to real Americans. You all know I'm a big fan of crypto. It's supercharging President Trump's America First economic miracle, and now you can be a part of it. I partnered with BlockTrustIRA because their mission perfectly aligns with President Trump's Make America Great Again agenda, smashing down the barriers between loyal patriots and the financial freedom they deserve. Their Animus AI trading platform works 24/7, analyzing market data and executing advanced crypto strategies that are beyond simply buy and hold, helping true American patriots build impressive wealth in Trump's historic economic boom. There's a reason their system was named the #1 crypto technology platform by Bitcoin Magazine from over 1,500 global competitors. Whether you're a teacher, truck driver, small business owner, or retiree watching inflation eat away your 401k, BlockTrustIRA's advanced Animus AI gives red-blooded Americans the same advantages as those coastal elites. Now, right now, their clients, get this, are seeing over 250% returns on their investments. Yes, you heard that right. 250% returns. And with military-grade security, investments are protected by up to $200 million in insurance. So what are you waiting for? Visit TurleyTalksCrypto.com and find out how they can help you join the Trump Crusade financial revolution that's finally giving forgotten Americans access to the greatest crypto wealth opportunity in history. For a limited time, they're offering my viewers, get this, up to $2,500 in bonus crypto when you open an account with them. This is so amazing. Do not wait on this. Crypto created 80,000 new millionaires last year. Why not you next? Visit TurleyTalksCrypto.com. That's TurleyTalksCrypto.com, making retirement great again.
The LAPD came in and they called it an unlawful assembly. I believe that the LAPD has this underhand, and they are very, very experienced in riot control. So this is something that they can handle. We do not have to have the National Guard here. We certainly do not have to have the Marines here.
That was California Representative Judy Chu, claiming that the LAPD had the protests under control all the while you could simultaneously see police cars on fire. I mean, even Baghdad Bob would be embarrassed over that. No matter how much California politicians and legacy media types desperately try to spin this, the images akin to marauding foreign invaders are undeniable. The Trump administration has stated unequivocally that the federal government will enforce law and order where local Democrat officials have deliberately abdicated their law enforcement responsibilities, repeatedly affirming their solidarity with the very illegal migrants, most of them violent criminals, being deported. In the face of Governor Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass's protests, FBI Director Kash Patel took to X and shared a post saying, quote, "Just so we are clear, this FBI needs no one's permission to enforce the Constitution. My responsibility is to the American people, not political punchlines. LA is under siege by marauding criminals, and we will restore law and order. I'm not asking you, I'm telling you." Now, ironically, the radical left's support of these violent protests has inadvertently reunited Elon Musk and President Trump after their public feud last week. We did a video earlier today highlighting Musk sharing a number of posts supporting Trump's law enforcement efforts, as well as posts of even those on the center left who are openly excoriating the incompetent leadership in California. So once again, we're seeing this pattern of how woke politics inevitably splits the left and unites the right to create precisely the 80-20 doom loop that the Democrats are caught up in. And once again, even CNN has had to admit that Trump's approval on his immigration policies is soaring. Check this out.
Net approval rating on immigration, it's gone up like a rocket. Compare now versus 8 years ago during Trump's first term. Look at this. There is no issue on which Trump is doing so much better than he was in his first term, more than the issue of immigration. No wonder the Times has written up the way that he is. Trump is begging for a fight on this because he knows what he's doing so far is working with the American electorate.
I love it. He's begging for this fight, right? It is no question that the left appears to be in shambles as they refuse to recognize that this is ultimately a losing issue. But it's not just losing here. It's losing across the Atlantic as well. Comparable concerns about border security and national sovereignty are fueling the rise of the populist right in Europe as we speak, raising the question, can patriots on both sides of the Atlantic together save Western civilization? Well, joining me today is one of my cultural heroes, someone who's on the front lines of defending Western civilization, Father Calvin Robinson, an outspoken proponent of conservative values across the pond in England, where they've been facing similar radical left-wing influence in their immigration policies as well. Father Calvin, welcome. It is such an honor to have you here, my friend.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for being here. So give us your take in all of this. How is it, how is what we're seeing in LA compared to what you've been experiencing in the UK, particularly with how our political elites seem to stigmatize any attempt at faithfully enforcing our border laws?
Absolutely. We're seeing similar things in the UK, protests that turn into riots. And it depends which side of the political line the protests or the riots are on in terms of what the media will call them. And we saw that over here in America as well with the mostly peaceful riots. When the cars are burning behind you, if it's on the right side, it's mostly peaceful. If it's on the wrong side, it's far right or alt-right or extremism of some kind. We see the exact same thing across the West at the moment. We had a couple of months ago, we had a very unfortunate situation. It was awful, actually, in that a son of an immigrant stabbed and killed 3 young girls, and we're talking elementary school age girls here.
Yeah.
And the media wouldn't tell us who it was. We weren't told who he was, what his religion was, where he was from, where his family was from. They kept trying to paint it out as if this was just a local British person. We find out that actually it's not. It's the son of an immigrant. And he's recently converted to Islam, and he's got terrorist books and all kinds of regalia that we are suspect, to say the least. But when the media covers things up like that, we start asking questions. Now, an incident happened last month where a white man happened to drive through a load of football fans, caused some major injuries. Straight away, the media were like, 52-year-old white man does X, Y, and Z. And we're like, oh, so we're allowed to know the person's ethnicity again, are we? We're allowed to know. And the media straight away, BBC, state-arm broadcaster, the British Broadcasting Corporation, said, we won't always release this information, which tells us that, okay, so going forth, we know that if the media says it was a white person, it was a white person. If the media doesn't tell us what race the person was, it was clearly not a white person. But that bias there is what's getting people's noses up, really.
Yeah.
So there's the bias on the one hand, and then there's also the gaslighting. And we're getting tired of the gaslighting.
Yes.
You know, telling you constantly that the truth is not the truth, or that lies are the truth. It's biblical, actually. You know, it's told that there'll become a time when they'll call good evil and evil good.
And evil good.
Yeah. Living through that at the moment.
Yeah, that's what I think makes this gaslighting so particularly pernicious, is the way they constantly try to present truth tellers as liars and the real liars as truth tellers. You know, I've heard I came across the term progressive realism, and that seems to what's captured our legacy media, CNN, BBC, and all this. And I guess they tie it back to the end of history thesis of Frank Fukuyama back in the early 90s, where it's just they bought into this notion that the arc of history inevitably moves towards liberalism, secularism, progressivism. And so with history at their backs, it's just incumbent upon them to point out how the right stands against history. And they can only do that by being duplicitous and by being, by fabricating and the like. Whereas the irony is they're the ones who are actually fabricating to try to fit the facts into this progressive realism, because I would argue, as I'm sure you would, the arc of history is not moving towards the progressive. It's actually it's taken a sharp turn to the populist movements, as it were.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? They believe that progress is always linear, and that as we progress, things get better. I don't think that's true. I think we've progressed in many ways, actually, in the last 100 years, where things in our society have got worse. But because some things have got better, such as living conditions and the average wage and such, they'll point at those things and make them the rule. Right. But we know what happens when you make the exception the rule. You ignore the reality. And that's what's going on in this case. We've seen many, many things in our society that are untrue being told to be true. Right now, for example, we're still being told that men can become women and women can become men. And that actually we should allow men to invade women's spaces, whether it's sports or prisons or changing rooms, whether they're men or boys, doesn't matter. So if it's your little girl getting changed ready to go swimming, so what if a boy wants to be in her space watching her get changed? If you're a nurse, and this is happening right now in the UK, if you're a nurse trying to work in a national healthcare service, so what if a man wants to come in your changing rooms and walk around half naked whilst watching you get changed? So what? No. Because men can become women and women can't. No, we know there is a truth. We know there's an objective, universal truth. But the progressives want to tell us otherwise because they have an ideology and everything has to fit into that ideology. And if it doesn't, we are the bad guys. And so rather than addressing this plurality of truths, what they'll do is they'll silence us. They'll shut us down. They'll censor us because that's easier than addressing the problem. And it's not just on a matter of truth. It's on a matter of beauty and goodness too. One of the biggest things we're seeing in the UK right now is this attack on goodness. Because of our mass immigration, there's a certain demographic, it's the Pakistani Muslim demographic, that happens to be grooming and raping young British girls.
Yeah.
But we can't
20 years.
So we silence the people that raise it.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard. Yeah, that was horrible. When I first did a deep dive into that, and really Matt Goodwin in particularly, and his reporting on it, my heavens, that was sickening beyond belief. Yeah, I when you were talking, I was reminded of Malcolm Muggeridge, a wonderful Brit, who said, "We've educated ourselves into imbecility." One of my favorite quotes, showing how progressive realism, by its nature, is anything but progressive and real. This CNN data that I was highlighting earlier, showing this massive swing to Trump and his approval, even among immigrants here, obviously legally, who very much approve of what he's trying to do to secure the southern border and mass deportations. And I had the honor of actually meeting Nigel Farage in Vegas a couple of weeks back. He was there for the Bitcoin conference, and it was right after Reform UK. Their polling came out 9 points ahead of Labour. That's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, historically unprecedented. I mean, they're about to leave Tories, into the dustbin of history. It's pretty incredible. Why do you think the issue of border security is resonating so strongly with the public on both sides of the Atlantic?
Because if we don't have borders, we don't have countries. It's as simple as that. It's common sense. Most people understand this, that we are a nation. And nations are like tribes. We are a group of people that share lots of commonalities in our ethnicity, in our culture, in our faith. And when you ignore that and pretend it doesn't exist, that's going to cause resentment because people have a sense of identity. I'm a Christian. I'm a British Christian. I'm an English British Christian. These things tie up. And so when you suddenly have mass immigration, whether it's legal or illegal, doesn't actually matter at this point. When you have mass immigration with different cultures, different ethnicities, different faiths, things are going to get shaken up. And it can work when you have a minority group within a country that has a predominant culture, ethnicity, and faith that people can subscribe to or at least appreciate. But when you no longer have that and you have multiculturalism to the point of saying that actually either our culture doesn't exist or our culture is bad and to be ignored, every other culture is to be embraced, people are going to feel like you do not like them. In fact, they're going to feel like you hate them and they hate their way of life and everything that they stand for. And actually, I think Western society is a good thing. I think Christian society is a good thing. These cultures are good. Not all cultures are good. Not all faiths are good. Not all ideas are good. We have to get back to common sense of being able to say, I like what we have right here. I want to protect it. And therefore, I'm going to vote for the party that says we will protect what we have. Not to say that we aren't going to share these things with other people, or we might invite a certain number of people in to share them with us, but just to say this is something that does exist, something that is good, something that deserves to be protected. That was common sense 100 years ago. And over the last few decades, the progressives have said it's all in the bin, year zero. And so we're voting now with our feet.
Yes. Yeah, and I got my doctorate in Durham at the UK, and I never understood the more liberal clergy that I rubbed shoulders with a bit there, and their seeming obsession to downplay the very culture that gave them the cathedrals they serve in. It just seemed like such a blatant contradiction. Shouldn't you be, and we'll circle back on this in a moment, but shouldn't you be the one on the front lines, just like you are, Father Calvin, on the front lines of actually protecting the very sacred that gives us our culture and our civilization in the first place? I mean, we spent a better half of the last, 1,500 years trying to Christianize, particularly Britain and Europe, and then through London, Philadelphia, and now you're just going to throw it all away for this liberal progressive globalism. It seems so odd, but it does appear to be a very secularized ideology that's taken hold.
It's a matter of faith, isn't it?
It
if
is.
you truly believe that there is one universal truth, and his name is Jesus Christ, and the only way to get to heaven is through the Son, then you want everyone to know the Son. Like, if you believe that there is a heaven after death, and there's one way, there's one invitation, you want everyone to have that invitation.
That's right.
So I can't understand a cleric that wouldn't want to give that invitation out, other than they no longer believe. This idea that, well, there are other religions and they all have different good ideas, and they may have some good ideas because they may be rooted in, they may have part of the truth, but they don't have the wholeness of the truth. Right. And our job is to give people that truth. If we love them, it's to give people the truth. The two greatest commandments are love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. And to love your neighbor means bringing them to heaven with you. It doesn't mean leaving them to worship pedophilic warmonger, or it doesn't mean leaving them to meditate and do yoga all day. It means bring them to Jesus Christ. It's simple.
That's right. Only the cross is the tree of life restored. I don't know if you're familiar with Eric Kaufman's work. He's a Canadian, expat in London. I think he was at University of London for a while, but then they kicked him out. I think he's at Buckingham College now. But he's documented a number of surveys on how woke issues actually split the left. Half the left supports it, but the other half, the Piers Morgan half, the Bill Maher half, they reject wokeness. Are you seeing that similar divisive dynamic in UK politics? In other words, do you see wokeness as actually being the left's downfall just because it's simply politically unsustainable?
I think that's a good word, politically unsustainable. What I see the wokeness as being is an Ouroboros, right? It's a self-eating snake. It destroys itself. It's a cancer. And so someone who was woke 5 minutes ago isn't woke in 5 minutes time, because you have to keep up with the new pronouns, the new ideas, the new truths. And if you don't keep up, you become part of the problem. And it is that cancel culture. If you are not part of the solution, you will be cancelled, you will be silenced and censored. And so people have to constantly battle to get on that woke train, and it gets tiring. And so eventually people fall off it. I often talk about J.K. Rowling because I still consider her quite liberal, right? She's a massive feminist, but to the woke, she's a far-right bigoted troll. It's insane that the way they disregard their own. And it's because
Father Calvin, who would have ever thought feminism would be considered far right? I mean, let that hit you.
In fact, I would say feminism is probably the biggest problem that we have in civil society. And we all spend our time talking about, whether it's Black Lives Matter or COVID jabs and lockdowns of freedoms, liberties, race, community, faith. Actually, a lot of it comes down to feminism, because what I find is a lot of conservatives have brought into this idea, because feminism was one of the first critical theories that really got pushed through out of academia into our everyday lexicon. And so we have this idea that there's somehow equality to be gained in the real world. And there's no equality. There's no such thing as equality anywhere. Like, we're equal in God's eyes in terms of dignity and worth. But other than that, you and I won't be equal. I'll probably be a bit taller than you, so I'll have some advantages. You'll be smarter than me with your doctorate, so you'll have some advantages. Like, everyone's got advantages and disadvantages in life. It's learning to adapt to that is the way to get through life. But telling everyone we have to drag each other back down to our level to be equal is a lie. And so feminism said for women to get equality in the world, they have to become like men. Of course, that led to the natural conclusion of transsexuality, of women becoming men. Of course it did.
Right. Brilliant.
And of course, it leads to the greatest crisis of our age. We are killing our own offspring.
Yes.
We can talk about mass immigration all day, but we're not reproducing because we're killing our babies faster than we can have them. And so this also comes down to feminism, this idea that women have to be successful. What does successful mean? Oh, working a 9-to-5, slaving away to pay a mortgage, to pay other people's taxes. In what world is that success? The greatest vocation a person can have is motherhood.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Yeah, we just had the natalism conference down in Austin. Carl Benjamin was out there. A bunch of it was a great gathering, just talking about the very serious issue of reproduction and fertility. But again, the beauty of it is those who take their faith seriously, conservative, particularly Christian traditions, but also, of course, Islamic traditions and so forth, Hindu. They're the ones who are reproducing. It's secularism and liberalism that just seems to be the death knell for reproduction. Cultural anthropologists, that's a really nice segue. Cultural anthropologists tell us there really is simply no culture without cult, without a cultus, without a sacred domain of worship. And I, just as someone who has studied culture now 20 years, it's never ceased to amaze me just how central faith is to a flourishing civilization. If you lose your faith, you're going to lose your civilization. What do you think the prospects are here for the revitalization of just classical Christian faith, particularly in the UK? We've got our issues here as well. That's, our low church American traditions got some pretty crazy sort of commercialized outworkings, but what do you think? Let's say big picture in the West in general, and then in the UK in particular. What are the prospects for sort of a revitalized faith so as to revitalize civilization?
Again, Dr. Steve, you've hit the nail on the head. This is the only way to save the West, and I mean this quite literally. The only way to save the West is return to our faith. Yeah. And we do call it the West today because we've all been secularized, but it's Christendom that we're talking about, right? For the last 1,000 years, what we now refer to the West was referred to as Christendom because it was built on Christian values. And what we've had over the last 100 years is liberals have said, well, we like those values, but we don't want to submit because submission is oppression. And Christians will say, no, submission to God is true freedom. But the liberals will say, no, freedom to sin is true freedom, and which we would call slavery to sin. But they want freedom to do everything and freedom from every responsibility. Everything's right with their responsibilities. So they've said, we want the values without the faith. And of course, that's like we've been a car running on fumes because we haven't been putting the gas back in, which is the faith. And so you can survive for a while with the values without the faith. It's like a house without a foundation. You can take the foundation away. The house might stand for a little bit, but eventually it's going to crumble. It's going to implode. And what we're seeing now is that implosion. Current demographical statistics show that by 2050 to 2060, the United Kingdom will be predominantly Islamic, and also white Britons will be in a minority. The English ethnicity is literally killing itself off, dying out, not having enough children, not having the faith, and a foreign invading force, which is being prompted by our elite or our establishment, are having children, do have faith, are reproducing. This is just statistics. This isn't ideology. This isn't racism, xenophobia. This is just, unless something changes within our lifetimes, England will no longer be the England it's been for nearly 2,000 years now.
And isn't it stunning someone like Richard Dawkins recognized that? It was amazing to me when I know he's referred to himself as a cultural Christian a number of times in the past, but the most recent interview, I forget what it was with, which it wasn't BBC or Channel 4, but he just came out and he lamented. It was around Christmas time. You remember? He lamented that he missed the hymns and he missed the decorations in his neighborhood in London, and how many of the celebrations had been replaced by Islamic regalia. And you just sat there and you say, here's a guy. I heard it put, I think it was Doug Wilson up in Moscow, Idaho, said, here's a guy who spent his entire life chopping down apple trees and then lamented that there are no more apple pies. It was,
100%.
It's so odd. But even he could recognize, do you understand that the truth, the goodness, and the beauty that you love comes back to a sacred center that is eternal and provides those eternal resources for constantly refreshing and re-engaging that culture, and you've cut the culture off from that, most especially at the border.
Every single human being is born with the love and knowledge of God in their hearts, right? So God has implanted himself in all of us to some degree. We all know he exists, and we can be oblivious to that. We can chase that, or we can reject that. And the New Atheist movement has spent its entire time rejecting that. People like Richard Dawkins, they know deep down in their heart that God is there, God is real, and God loves them. But they've been fighting against it for so long that that's all they know. And that becomes a religion in and of itself. Atheism is a belief structure, and they have to keep doubling down, because otherwise it's all for naught. But even they are starting to realize now that they've been attacking the very thing that has made their life worth living.
Yes.
This Western civilization, this Christendom, is a good, beautiful, and true place because it's built on the foundations that are Jesus Christ. Right. Remove him, and you create a vacuum. And we know that nature abhors a vacuum, so it will be filled with something else, naturally. And they thought that liberalism could take its place. But liberalism has birthed wokeness. And as we said earlier, wokeness is an Ouroboros. It's a self-eating snake. It cannot sustain itself. It dies instantly. And so it's being replaced everywhere by Islam, which is like a cancer. It is a cult that was founded by literally a warmongering pedophile. But even just saying those words now to the liberals, that, oh, no, it's a faith, so you must treat it respectfully. And it's like, no, this was a man who married a girl at 6 years old, consummated the wedding at 9 years old, and spread his so-called religion through brute force. Like, these are not values that we should consider good by any moral objective. But if you don't have the moral compass of Christianity, by what standard are you going to say what something is good or not?
There's no immune system to it. Father Calvin, we have some links down below to your social media. Where can people go to keep up with your amazing work?
My X is Calvin Robinson, and my YouTube is at Common Sense Crusade.
At Common Sense Crusade. Gang, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube and to Father Calvin's X account. I am a subscriber. Love seeing his daily tweets. Father Calvin, you always have a home here. Please come back anytime. Thank you so much for everything that you do to stand up for truth. And we just would love to have you back anytime.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you.
Good fight.
Let's be honest. We're not getting any younger. And if you want to look and feel your best, you need to check out Pure Health Research. They have 45 premium health supplements designed to help with your every health goal, whether it's boosting your energy or trimming belly fat or supporting healthy blood sugar or pumping your testosterone up or even reducing swelling in your legs. Pure Health Research Supplement Store has you covered. Each formula is crafted with natural, non-GMO ingredients backed by clinical research and manufactured right here in the good old USA. And here's the best part. Pure Health Research is offering you an exclusive 35% discount. All you have to do is go to purehealthresearch.com and then use coupon code TURLEY at checkout. With their 365-day money-back guarantee, there is zero risk in trying something new. So why wait? Head on over to purehealthresearch.com right now, explore their 45 amazing supplements, and save 35% off before this deal ends with coupon code Turley. Don't miss this chance to feel your best. All right, it's our hotline time, 717-844-5984. Just give us a call, leave your message on there. Please keep it to about 30 seconds. Mike, our producer, is like, oh, these things get so long. 30 seconds, please. And if it's a good question, we'll feature it on our Tuesday night and Thursday night broadcast. Again, that's 717-844-5984. What do we got here, Micah?
There, Dr. Steve. I was wondering if you would opine on the motivation of the far left into the transgender movement. It seems like makes absolutely no sense, and it is a losing issue, yet they are all in on having small children change their sex and be subjected to harmful surgery and dangerous drugs. So I was wondering, what is their motivation? Why are they doing this? So I look forward to hearing your response. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for that. Wow, I think you can hit it at multiple angles. The one that makes, I guess, the most sense for me is rooted in the left's commitment to dissensus. So it's the opposite of consensus. This is dissensus. And dissensus is the notion that the social norms of a society are unjust, and that a morally serious person, literally a morally awake person, a woke person, will commit their lives to overturning the unjust social consensus. So that's what this dissensus is. The social norms of society are unjust, and we need to overturn those social norms. So this is why the left has so much propensity towards protest. Why, have you noticed the right rarely protests, and the social norms have to get so insane before the right ends up protesting. So it's the same kind of pattern, but we saw it, for example, during the COVID lockdowns. The tyranny got so out of control, finally patriots rose up, or the discrepancy, shall we say, in the 2020 vote had gone so unrecognized and so dismissed by our political elite that it caused, at least in part, a lot of people to freak out on January 6th. So the right can get caught up in this dissensus as well. But the left lives for dissensus because the left thinks that society is systemically racist, bigoted, sexist, and the like. And so what protest does is it's a performative flip of social norms. So the issues that they believe have been marginalized by virtue of an unjust social order, in a protest, the protesters occupy central space, like a college campus or a highway or town hall, whatever it is. They occupy a central space, and by occupying that central space, they give a lived out performance of centralizing what was marginal and marginalizing what was central. So universities are bought and paid for by the Jewish lobby. But if we can all come together and chant Free Palestine in the center of the courtyard, now all of a sudden the Jewish lobby, in a sense, is pushed into the periphery, and now the Palestinian cause and the Gaza cause is now central. So this is how dissensus works. Dissensus is all about a commitment to overturning social norms that are considered unjust. So if you think it through, what is the ultimate expression of overturning traditional gender norms? What is the ultimate expression of overturning traditional gender norms? it's transgenderism, right? So to me, that's why they're willing to die on that hill, not because of transgenderism per se, but because they're so committed to the ideology that gives birth to it in the first place. Traditional gender norms, cis norms as they call them, must by definition be unjust because they're part of this patriarchal system. And so transgenderism is a way of marginalizing an unjust system and centralizing the overturning of that unjust system. So that's why I think transgenderism, it tends to be the hill they'll die on. Again, ironically, they will die on it because the vast majority of the people do not share their dissensus sentiments.
Hello, Dr. Turley. I'm just a resident from upstate New York, and I just have something that's always been buzzing the back of my brain, and that is what seems to be like it's just the general traditional politicians' inability to understand the power of grassroots movement, especially those that are built on more independent digital foundings. I think a key example of the more independent side of information sharing is got to be the 2024 election, where one candidate was able to visit assorted podcasters and live streamers, just able to have a normal conversation with them, whereas the other had this very clear, constant need of a Hollywood production, just all lights, cameras, and smiles. You get the feeling that there's just this growing disdain with these large budget setups may have had any sort of influence on the American people to the point where they just decide, even if I do not fully support one candidate, I would much rather somebody who seems to be trying to be real rather than just pretend nothing's happening or just pretend to connect. Thank you.
Yes. Brilliant. And I, in many ways, the answers, as I'm listening to you, the answer is in your question. You've got it. It's just putting the pieces together. And it's something that they're facing, the problem they're facing in the UK with the Tories, the Conservative Party. So what happened in the UK is very interesting because in December of 2019, so I'll tell you this story because I think having an objective view of it, I think will help make sense of things. So in December of 2019, they had a national parliamentary election, all throughout the nation, as it were, the kingdom. And Boris Johnson was at the time the prime minister. He called for the election, snap elections, and it was basically the second Brexit election. And bottom line, Boris Johnson said, you vote for us, you vote for the Conservatives, we will, his slogan was, we're going to get Brexit done. We're going to get Brexit done, right? Brexit originally passed on June 23rd, 2016. We're going to get Brexit done. Brits went to the polls. It was one of the biggest turnouts ever in any election, almost as big, as if I recall, as the Brexit election itself, which was the biggest. And the Tories won in a massive landslide. It was the biggest landslide win in 100 years. And they won because of the same thing that happened with Trump back in 2016. And they won the same reason of what happened with the Brexit vote back in June of 2016. The working class that normally voted Labour, their left wing, crossed over, defected, and voted for the Conservatives, for the Tories, precisely because of this issue of border security and economic security. They wanted a sovereign Britain. And so they left the left, because they saw the left as just totally globalist, and they sided with the right. And the right now, the center right Tories or conservatives, they're known as both the same thing. They had an opportunity to secure a coalition that would probably last them at least 100 years. It was an enormous coalition, and they squandered it. Those very same voters all turned against them last year or 2 years ago when the Tories were voted out of office en masse. And the reason is because the conservatives, the Tories, they dwelt in a culture, a high-class, aristocratic, university-based culture that did not know how to relate to the working class culture. And they betrayed them because they just didn't know how to speak to them. They didn't understand their issues. They didn't understand what animated them and the like. So the breakdown in that culture caused them to crash and burn as a party. And so it's no coincidence that Reform UK, that more or less started in a pub, because Brexit started in a pub, led by Nigel Farage, it's no coincidence that they're now in first place among all the popularity of all the parties, the two other major parties, Labour and Tories, and by about 10 points. I mean, it's just absolutely astonishing. It's happening all over Europe. The rise of the populist right is happening because neither the center left nor the center right can relate intelligibly to the grassroots anymore, because there's just been such a massive gap opening up between the globalist elite and regular average folk. And so the legacy media can't relate to average Americans or Brits or Europeans anymore. Universities can't relate to them anymore. Our politics and political parties can't relate to them anymore. Increasingly, CEOs and corporations can't relate to them anymore. So what's happening is you're seeing this massive parallel economy form, where you have parallel institutions like independent content creators and parallel politicians. Trump is a third-party candidate that got a major party nomination, whereas Nigel Farage started a third party, quite literally, Reform Party, and now they're number one. Same with AFD in Germany. Same with National Rally in France. Nawrocki in Poland just won. Same thing. He's not even part of a party. He's outside of a party. He was endorsed by the Law and Justice Party, but it's all the same thing. They're outsiders. Javier Milei in Argentina. So, and then I think in many ways, both Trump and Musk, when he bought Twitter, they sort of mainstreamed now institutionally those parallel institutions. And so what we're seeing is really our politics effectively shift from that horizontal divide, left versus right, that defined politics forever. It's now going to a vertical divide, the people versus the political class, this aloof elite. And the people now are represented by podcasts, independent content creators. I mean, Fox has gotten very, very populous. Newsmax, I was just on Newsmax on Sunday with John Glasgow. You name, Real America's Voice. Notice that name, right? Real America. These are real Americans who it's their voices, the concerns that they have. The Steve Bannon realm, as it were, that has just created this massive ecosystem that's just taking over politics, because it's effectively redefined politics in terms of this vertical divide between the people and this permanent political class, where the gap is so massive that in the end we have to overturn the permanent political class. We have to replace them with what we call aristo-populists, those who do have tremendous amount of power and wealth, but they use that power and wealth for the good of the people, So they're very much connected with the people. Trump is much more comfortable at a UFC fight than he is at a royal dinner, for example. So yes, I think you're absolutely right that Kamala looked like she was so uncomfortable among the riffraff, right? And Gavin, just like Gavin Newsom making all those weird kind of hand gestures, those voodoo movements. He's so uncomfortable when he's just around average folk, because he's just been raised in this globalist elite sphere, this cultural sphere that's so far removed from the grassroots. And so they're just going to go the way of the dodo bird. They're literally going to, the political and economic oxygen is just going to be sucked away from them as it grows more and more and more in a new ecosphere of an aristopopulist sphere, where the people and a new aristocracy, because you're always going to have an elite, you're always going to have a top 1% or whatever, but that top 1% wants to enact and enable the values, interests, concerns of the people. They embrace those values, interests, concerns rather than disdain them like this polished professional elite. And with that, I believe we are done. Do we have our 2 calls? So, gang, love you. I will see you tomorrow. We've got full content all week long. So make sure you tune in bright and early tomorrow for more videos coming where we celebrate the rise of a new conservative age because of what you did on November the 5th. God bless.